Hi, my name is Nikki Wells, and I'll be talking about the mathematical modeling of yellow fever resistance in humans, monkeys, and mosquitoes in Brazil. Now, as I came to this topic, it was a few different things. When I was researching the small talk, I actually wanted to do the animal cognition and how they responded to different things. But then I decided that I want to do something more towards my major or potential graduate studies and deal with viruses. Now, I knew a lot about Ebola because it happened more in my age, and same as of right now with COVID. But one thing I didn't know much about when I was discussing with professors was the yellow fever. It was a little bit more before my time and more before I discussed it in school. So I thought, why not learn about something that was new, something that would expand on my knowledge of using animals as the modeling systems as we used C. elegans in our biology classes. So that leads me to our next slide of the outline. I will be starting with an opening question where I want you all to pause the video and think about what I will be asking. I'm going to define and provide background surrounding yellow fever. I'm going to give you three types of cycles, the hypothesis of the paper, kind of two papers mixed together, more of the methodology that they did, the data that was provided, and then the conclusion and the 3 points I want you all to take away from this presentation. Now, for my response, I want you to think about what is yellow fever? Where have you heard of it before if you have? And do you know where it originated or what species actually was known for the spread of yellow fever? Now pause and think about that for a second and then start the video again. Now, as for the background, I'm going to start as what is yellow fever? Yellow fever is a virus. It's known as an RNA virus that actually belongs to the genus Flavirus group. There are many different ones, but in this case, that's just the one we will be discussing. It is an African mosquito-borne infection than primates, in this case, as you see in the background, monkeys. And there's a lot of stigmatism that surrounded monkeys during this time with yellow fever. In this case, the picture is showing monkeys that were either half of them were exposed to yellow fever and the other half were actually beaten by people in Brazil because a article that was released had said that they were the cause, which was actually false information, but people believed it to be true, so they were killing monkeys. But anyway, yellow fever is transmitted between monkeys by forest-dwelling primatophilic Aedes mosquitoes. The virus is actually a vector of the Aedes aegypti, which were introduced to actually America later on after it infected Brazil, and it is known as a zoonotic habitat, enforced habitat with slave trade during this time. And so it was easily passed on, and it could be passed on from humans to humans, through blood or from needles. It could be passed on from a mosquito to a primate known as a monkey, or from a monkey to us in different habitats. So mosquitoes acquire the virus by feeding on an infected primate, whether it be a human or a non-human. And then it transmitted the virus to other primates, human or non-human. Um, People infected with yellow fever virus were infectious to mosquitoes as well. So if a mosquito infected you, um, another mosquito can feed on you and would get the virus and then would go on and pass it on. So it's very, very viremic. And shortly before the onset of the fever, you actually had about 5 days before knowing if you had it or not, or before it actually went through your system and you became viral. Now, this virus is actually deadlier than any other neotropical non-human primate viruses that were more troublesome for the host, because normally hosts are needing to survive for a successful virus to do anything. But in this case, yellow fever wasn't needing a host that was able to survive, actually. It was able to survive by moving very, very quickly, and its original host can die and it still be okay, and it would still spread. Now, it actually had a longer coevolution in African countries with other animals and other primates and even humans. So the longer period kind of created a coevolution within each other. Now, as I said earlier, I was talking about zoonotic diseases, and that kind of is the infectious disease caused by a pathogen, in this case, this virus, that has jumped from a non-human animal to a human. And in this case, the mosquito got it from a either human or non-human, and then they passed it around to primates, and then they passed it also to humans. So it was given back and forth, which leads us to, where did all this come from? Where did yellow fever originate? So yellow fever is distributed in West, Central, and East Africa and in Southern America. So like Brazil, Panama, northern parts of Argentina. It has actually never been detected in Asia. It is very like a catastrophic epidemic, kind of like we're in right now with COVID. So it caused tens of thousands of deaths, and people spent millions trying to find a cure, trying to rebuild what had been lost, like the Panama Canal, for instance, they were trying to build during this time, and thousands of people were dying. And so actually the eradication of this virus led to the final build of the Panama Canal. Now, the only way you could travel after this got so bad was through vaccination, which had yet to be at this time. And this was because the vector Aedes aegypti was once an epidemic in Europe as well, and responsible for large epidemics in yellow fever in Junji. And the reasons for its disappearance was, even after the vaccination, was kind of unknown, because they kind of expected for it to stay around a little bit, but it kind of just disappeared. And many factors of that was, after World War II, things kind of settled down. Things kind of evolved. People were cleaner to an extent, and areas were getting better in establishments. And that was until another species, which is where we saw another rise, which was the Aedes albopictus, which leads to the 17D vaccination, a safe and effective, very actually inexpensive vaccination for yellow fever. This is known as the YF17D. YF standing for yellow fever. It has actually been used for more than half a century since this has came out. It is actually used today even, and the vaccine is highly effective, but it is very fairly used in some countries actually. Basically 17D is based on a live attenuated viral strain and is only commercially available yellow fever vaccine that we know of and that we have at this moment. It is actually given in a single, or basically a intramuscular injection through a shot. And it's very highly effective. It actually was approaching 100% effectiveness until recently, which I will be discussing next slide. Of the tens of thousands of workers, as I said before, that were constructing the Panama Canal, for this to come out, it basically was led to the establishment of the Panama Canal. Because of its cure for yellow fever, people were able to finish it, because beforehand, like 85% of people were hospitalized. 22,000 people had died due to this yellow fever who were trying to build the Panama Canal. And that's just the Panama Canal alone. Now, this kind of shows the mortality rate of yellow fever. I just kind of thought y'all should see this in a more graph stance than just me telling you how bad it was, because here it shows on the left, graph A, the probability of extinction and the mortality rate. As the mortality was high here at 90, the most likely, not just humans, but like other animal species were going extinct was very high. And then as the mortality rate lowered due to a vaccine, 17D, the probability of extinction lowered. Now on graph B, you have the frequency of outbreaks. As outbreaks got more and more in different countries and they got so bad, the extinction rate was also higher. And that leads us to the transmission cycles of yellow fever. You have three. You have the savannaic, which is a jungle, basically meaning trees. Um, you have an intermediate, which is in the savanna, and then you have urban. So in a jungle in the savannaic, humans are sporadically infected by mosquito bites, which typically occur in like forested areas. The jungle cycle involves like a transmission of virus between non-human primates. An example that we would see here is monkeys, is the main one that you probably can think of, and then mosquito species found in the forest canopy. The virus is transmitted by mosquitoes from monkeys to humans when humans enter the forest to hunt, gather food, harvest and timber, and so on. In Africa, actually, was more of where the intermediate savanna cycle took place, and that exists that involves the transmission of the virus from mosquitoes to humans living or working in the jungle border areas. In this cycle, the virus can be transmitted from monkey to human or from human to human via mosquitoes. And then there is the urban cycle. The urban cycle involves the transmission of the virus between humans and urban mosquitoes, primarily the Aedes aegypti. The virus is usually brought to the urban setting by a viromatic human who was infected in the jungle or savanna, is normally how you brought it to an urban area. And once it got there, it spread pretty quickly. Now, the only way a human can transfer it to a human is through blood contact or a needle that someone poked. It's very hard, but it actually at this time was very easy because we didn't have the same safety standards that we do today in medical practices. So as these promestic vectors were present, they became infectious in towns and villages, and they were destroyed, eradicated. It was devastating these towns in these urban areas. And basically that leads us to like the transmission of this virus. And many of you don't know, but the symptoms that this virus gave were traumatic. You basically got these symptoms. Most people didn't survive. So basically the virus circulated between monkeys in the forest and the humans in the villages, and even in urban areas. And basically the principle of the savannaic vectors bred in tree holes and similar to small collections of water. Now, the infection in African monkeys is asymptomatic or mild, you could say. And this is known for the epizoonotics, which is the outbreak of the disease, were signaled when humans had acquired the disease and by just spreading it. The virus is lethal to more of the Western Hemisphere primates, because when the jungles go silent, I guess you can say you don't hear anything. So you knew that the mortality rate was high, especially in the howler monkeys that we will be discussing. So you knew that, oh crap, the outbreak was here. And so basically it was the bites of the infected mosquitoes were the only mode of transmission, the only known mode of transmission, especially at this time. But people didn't know that. So mosquitoes had acquired the virus when they fed on a viromatic host. Where this originally host was infected, we don't know much about. But after the mosquito fed on the host, and many times of it sucking on someone's blood and using its salivary glands, is when it became a problem. So in a matter of weeks, and many, as you could say, blood meals later, it became infective. And then once a mosquito is infected, it's infected for life. Now, new infections in humans can occur when the saliva that contained the virus is injected into a non-immune host during subsequent blood meals, you can say. Now, the extrinsic incubation period that it takes, that is required for the mosquito to become infective is about 10 days, depending on the temperature, the environment you're in, what are the cycles you're in. And there's also evidence of the vertical transmission, which is directly from the adult female mosquitoes via eggs to adults of the next generation. So if a viromatic female laid eggs on something, you didn't see it, and you eat that, you become virumatic from that, which was actually not known at this time until later on. Now, the onset of symptoms is very sudden. Basically 3 to 5 days after infection, which you had no idea in those days that you have it. Now, the disease can cause a wide spectrum of symptoms that many never recovered from. It could be from a mild headache to a very fatal jaundice. In clinical cases, there is a sudden onset of fever with severe headache. Then you have muscle pains and even jaundice, which once you have that, is your liver is failing. That's where you get a yellow tint in your skin. And then in the next slide, I will show you the difference between what your hand's supposed to generally look like and then what a jaundice patient will look like. Now, jaundice may appear on the 3rd day, which indicates like the poor prognosis. In severe cases, there may be even spontaneous hemorrhage, renal failure, delirium, coma, and as many people have experienced, death. Mortality rate of these clinical cases was as high as about 80%, which is actually on par now. They have stuff on Ebola, which you all remember is very, very virumatic and had a high mortality rate. Now, the virumatic of these transmissions were very hard to track for the longest time. And people didn't know much about jaundice either. It wasn't until later on that people were able to fully understand the extents of these symptoms and how to treat them without the without the vaccine that the 17D YF17D vaccine. But you still weren't cured from yellow fever, which would still lead to death. Now in this picture, it is showing you what a normal hand should look like and then what a jaundice patient looked like. And then once you reach this stage, you generally were not going to live. Your liver was failing, your kidneys were failing, you were dying. So as this paper that I read was hypothesized, is that yellow fever impacted these brown howler monkeys in Argentina, which was used at a modeling approach based on population viability analysis and epidemiological dynamics. So basically, they thought that predicting yellow fever through species distribution, modeling of the virus vectors in monkeys, you were able to come up with a solution of actually, if you give 17D, the yellow fever virus, to a monkey and a mosquito feeds on that monkey, the monkey will get the vaccine as well. And then as it goes and feeds on a human, the human will also get a trace of that vaccine. Now, we still vaccinated humans, especially the more susceptible elderly and people that had underlying health issues, as we will with today. And it is seen that with this yellow fever virus, this vaccine was very inexpensive due to the fact that all you had to do was give it to these monkeys and it could save them and the other species that were infected in humans. Because if we just vaccinated humans with this, which you couldn't give everyone at the same time, it'd be very, very expensive and very, very extraneous, especially during this time period, that them being able to vaccinate these monkeys would allow the inexpensiveness of it, but also help save other species as well, was their original thought, which, as we find, will actually be truth. And they did a very good job at laying out the methodology and data that they discussed. So basically, the methodology that they used in this case was that vaccinating these monkeys against the yellow fever, as I stated, was a very common practice at 17D in the vaccine development. Now, it may seem strange at first, why are we vaccinating monkeys? Don't humans need it first? Yes, we did give it to the very virumatic patients who needed it before the rest, because either A, they were going to die, or the susceptible patients who couldn't get it because there's no way they were going to be able to fight it off. Now, this is a very feasible and theoretically could eliminate the infection among non-human primates if we just gave it to the monkeys. But as I stated above in their hypothesis, it actually did more than just that. It overspilled into the human population, which turned out to be very helpful. Now, the yellow fever disease spread itself to other southern eastern states of Brazil, causing close to thousands of humans to be infected and hundreds of confirmed deaths before and in the process of the vaccination coming out, especially within species, especially the non-human primates. Now, urban monkeys, because in this time, people owned monkeys. It was a very common practice. And so it was kind of responsible at the time, or thought to be responsible at the time, for triggering the human outbreaks in Brazilian cities, especially in closer to our time of 2016. Now, that wasn't necessarily true, as this article that was released that claimed that monkeys were the cause of yellow fever, people started killing monkeys, and it was a very terrible incident, and many monkeys were dying, and it was false information, and it was a very sad time for people that owned monkeys and for Brazil, as that was one of their known populations. Now, for their methodology, I'm just going to discuss this picture that they kind of laid out for us. They took a heat graph kind of the mosquitoes and the monkeys. I will show the monkey one in a minute. These orange areas are the more populated areas of suitability for the mosquitoes. As you can see right now at the moment, it's this top area. Now, as you go to the monkeys, it's more spread out. We had more data on monkeys than we did mosquitoes, because mosquitoes are kind of hard to track due to their small size, and there's more of them than monkeys or any other species that they were measuring at this moment. So it led to this yellow fever outbreak combination of the monkeys and the mosquitoes. So these orange areas in this one is the overlap between the monkeys and the mosquitoes. And as you can see, as time went on, October all the way to June, it spread a lot more. That was how fast the yellow virus spreads in just a short few months. Less than a year, it could spread across an entire country or state. When it got to the States, it was very fast in spreading and killing, and it was a very traumatic experience and time for many people. Which leads me to this final present graph of not really pertaining to much of their data, but of what they're talking about. As it finds out, the 17D vaccine isn't forever, as they had once thought. It is actually now, as of 2017, not being very useful. It's starting to lose its susceptibility for people. So as of 2017, you can see the yellow fever cases have risen. The deaths have gone up, not necessarily tremendously from what it was. But as you can see, from the 60s all the way till now, there was like no deaths, barely any cases. And then now the cases and the deaths are beginning to rise. Now, due to COVID at the moment, they are ignoring the fact that this is happening. They can't really bring it to light at the moment. It's kind of swept under the rug and be like, okay, we'll deal with this after COVID's over. But if you think about it, it could happen during COVID. This is something that yellow fever is very important. And I think that it's very important for you to know that it's out there, and that the 17D vaccination isn't forever, and that they are going to have to come up with a new vaccination and use monkeys as they once before as a modeling system. Now, for my conclusion, and the points I kind of want you to take away from this presentation are: the vaccine 17D is not permanent as once thought. And that kind of shows that no vaccination really is. And then that monkeys were used as a modeling system and will probably be used again as the modeling system. we were able to distribute the vaccine through monkeys in this case. And I think that that's probably what the best solution is for the new vaccine that they're going to have to come out with, or the reconstructing of the one that they already have. And lastly, that yellow fever is not only devastated Brazil, but it devastated other countries as well, even devastated America. More than that, we don't even have any idea about, due to our lack of knowledge about it and our lack of discussing it. And I think that this is a very problematic disease, and especially as it's starting to show up and it's going to become very problematic. We need to know more about it. We need to know about the spread. We need to know about the symptoms. We need to be able to spot it before it gets worse. So this is my presentation, and I hope you have enjoyed it.